Hi, and welcome back to the shop. Before we get started on another group of the iron planes in what is part 3 of this series, keeps getting longer and longer. I'm a little worried about that. But before we get on to a new plane, let's talk about what little discrepancies we had in the other series in part 2, and how some of that information that we were wondering about has been solved with the help of some people who wrote in and helped me out by giving me some additional information on some of the questions I had. So let me show you these planes that we were looking at before and see if we can clarify some of the things that we went through last time, and then we'll go on to another plane. So let's note the differences in these three planes. This is the one that I thought was a 180 series, and I still think that it was originally, but I'll explain that. This is the 191 here, and this is the 192. So this is the widest of the three, but the reason I've got them in this order is because of the time period. You'll note that right here in this area here, there's been a big change. This one and this one are the same, but this one here, being a much later plane, has a raised area in here that you can note it by this circle here, which is not here. So that's a big change between here and here. Also, you can see in the newer ones, this is very well defined, this line framing in this dappled area. But you can see some of the line here, so you know that this earlier one had it as well. Now, the other thing that we have here is the number 182 Stanley with a large lettering, and that is predating, both of these are predating this one, which has added in Made in USA. So there is a big time difference in these three. Now here's what I think happened and why these are a little confusing. These two are definitely 190 series, and they have the spur on the back to prove this. So the only difference between the 180 series and the 190 series is that it included a spur. So when I said this was a 182, that's what it looked like. But in here, there's a little separation of this area here in the 8. But you can see that the right side of the 8 is absolutely two circles joined like a snowman. And the 191, when you look at numbers, you can see that right line goes straight up and down. So here's what I'm thinking. It was $15 more for the 190 series than the 180 series. The $15 was for milling in that little spur area on the opposite side. But if we look at this, what I thought was a 182, if we look at the other side, and this was what was confusing, there is the spur. So here's what I think happened. And this happened a lot with Stanley because it was mostly about making money. I think they had a lot of the 182s and they weren't selling. So what they did was they came back in and they milled in the spot for the spur, and then they came in here and just took out that little bit from here to here of the 1/8. So you see the 8, but you see there's an opening here, and thereby turning this into a 192 and getting $15 more for it. Now, the other changes in these are on the irons. You can see a difference. This one, you see, has Stanley Sweetheart Made in USA. Now, that Stanley Sweetheart is considered a Y mark. And if you look in the book, they were only made in 1921 and 1922. Now, I'm thinking that since this construction is the same as this construction, even though I don't have the logo on this iron, I would say that both of these are from the same period, 21 and 22. This one, where they added the Made in USA, that happened in 1929. So Made in USA was added from that point on. So this one, let's say it started in 1929, this body. But if you look at the iron on this one, you see the notched rectangle and Made in USA. The notched logo, made in USA, was introduced in 1936. So this iron could be a replacement iron, but between 1929 and 36, I'd be surprised if somebody wore that iron completely out to that point. It could be, though. So this could be an earlier plane from after 1929 with a 1936 on blade, or this could be a 1936 plane, more likely than not. So this was a 182 body, and it had been converted to a 192. This was a 191 body with no changes, and this is another 192 body, which, again, I suspect has not been changed. I'll go with that. But now you see how I could have been very confused on that other one, because that is absolutely originally an 8. So we live and learn. And it was really good because I put out that video and I got some responses from people, and their point was well put, that the 180 series had no spur added, making it a cheaper plane, and the 190 series had it. Other than that, they would be identical. Now, this is not identical to these, but that's because of the year that was changed later. That's the whole body change, adding this round disc here for support. This rib here, you see, is added here. It's not on this one here, coming this way, not there. So this was added. So this was a major body change for these whenever this happened. Interesting. The next group of planes that are in chronological order, being introduced in 1905, but with a patent date of 1903, is the number 146, 47, and 48. As you can see here, they are called a match plane, a double-ended match plane. And there are 3 different sizes, and they're for doing tongues and grooves on 2 boards that you want to join together. Patented in 1903, as I said, by Justice A. Trout. That's the basic pattern, and designed for use on 3/8 to 1/2 inch lumber. The tongue cutter has one edge wider than the other to allow working on stock of various widths. Here they are. Here they are. The 146 for 3/8, the 147 for 5/8, and the 148 for 7/8. These will do predominantly what most people need. They are different time periods, and you can see that in the 3 knobs and how they differ. Here you can see that this one is plain on the top, and this next one here actually has the Stanley name and logo in there. And then the third one has the old-fashioned knurled with this little pattern on the top. These are very interesting planes. They have a single thin cutter matching the width of the tongue and groove that you want to do. So that's a skinny cutter. And on the opposite side is a separate cutter that's wider, and it has a notch in the middle of it so that it is performing the duty of supplying the tongue, which leaves that piece of wood in between those 2 levels to still stay proud. This is the skinnier one. This is for the 3/8. So in order to try these planes out, I'm going to make sure I put these 2 together here and just flatten them out so that they're even and flat. And that way I'm working on the same plane for the tongue and the groove. So we'll set this one aside like that, and we'll start with this one here. And let's try out. These I haven't set yet, so I don't know how deep this cut is, but we'll see. Let's see how easy that seems to be cutting very well. And that's creating a groove. Now, how far down the groove will go is determined by this plane itself, because you can see that it can't go any more than this distance in. So that is not a terrible thing. You don't really need to go too deep, but there it's already starting to bottom out. So let's see how that works. So we did that one. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to take this one here that we had and turn it around this way. And you see we put one groove in that one. Let's see how the other one does. So we switch over from one side of the plane to the other, and we'll see how that works. Now you can already see that it's leaving this raised surface here, and hopefully that will match the other one. And it also will only go so deep because it'll bottom out and not go any deeper. And so it's kind of foolproof as far as how much you have to cut in there. So there you go, it's bottomed out. It's not going any further. Now we have these two to see how they line up. And there you have it. There's the tongue and groove, and it is very much flush along here. So, and not a lot of wiggle room up and down. So that's good. So the one that I did an example of was number 147. And it is for a 5/8 inch board. Now this was only 3/4 of an inch, and it worked fine, but you can see that the groove is off-centered. It'll still work fine as it did, but it means that your tongue and groove aren't in the middle of your board. So that's the one that I tried. Now the number 46, pardon that, the number 46 is for a 3/8 inch thick board. So it's not going to work on 3/4 inch because the tongue part, even though it sticks out from the side here, it's not enough to do the full 3/4, and that has to be wide enough so that when you're left with the tongue, the blade is wide enough to get all of this excess meat off of the wood. So that's what's important there. And this one, which is the largest of the three, and this is a 148. This one here, you can see just how wide that iron is. So you can do a board on this one up to 7/8 inches wide. So this is for a wider board. This board here is still too wide for it, but you can get up to a 7/8 inch board in there. So they're great planes. Let's go on. 1911 brought out the 289 Stanley FILLESTER plane. And it was a beauty. It was wider than the other ones that they had come out with the width of 1 7/8 here, and a skewed blade, not perpendicular to the bottom. And I've done another video about these, so I'm not going to go on too much about it, but take a look at the kind of work that it can do, and you'll really appreciate this plane. The 289 FILLESTER plane, or FILLESTER, this is the next one in the chronological order made by Stanley. And you can see here what it does and what its purpose is. I'm cutting across the grain, getting these beautiful shavings, and you can see that I'm getting a nice clean cut with this skewed blade. And that's the key, or one of the keys, to going across the grain. right in here is where I kind of let it go away from that shoulder. And in doing that, I have to come back here and try to clean that up by just using the plane to bring that down to being flush with the rest of it. But there aren't a lot of planes that are going to give you such a beautiful tenon, a beautiful cut across the grain. Now, in looking at this plane, and it's mentioned in my other video, but I'll just bring it up here as a review. The scoring, the wood scoring iron here, you see, is different than the other spurs on the other planes, on the long thin ones and the ones with 3-tab cutters. And this is on both sides of this plane, and it is attributed to Bodmer. You've heard me referring to these FILLESTER and FILLESTER planes throughout these videos. And I want to kind of explain it, if I can, why I keep going back and forth between the two. The Craftsman plane here, notice, says Iron Rabbet and FILLESTER, not FILLESTER. And all of the catalogs, the Stanley catalogs, refer to their planes as a FILLESTER, FILLETSTER. At this point, they're kind of hodgepodge together, but the FILLESTER that's on a Craftsman box, which seems funny to me, is actually the English term, and the FILLESTER is a U.S. term for the same basic thing. This is according to Whelan's the wooden plane, the book on wooden planes. Now, basically, he's saying that the FILLESTERs that were in England with a fixed fence, it's called a standing FILLESTER, was typical in England, but it was virtually unknown in the U.S. So at some point, when these started developing in the U.S. by Stanley and other companies, it was changed to FILLESTER. Why, I really don't know why that change was made. But there was several types, and as I've said before, a rabbet plane is simply a rabbet plane with no fence. But a FILLESTER or FILLESTER is a rabbet plane with a fence. Now, standing FILLESTERs, or FILLESTERs in England, were rabbet planes with a fixed fence. So you would see part of the body would come down, and that would be the fence, and then you'd have a portion that's a rabbet, and that's called a standing rabbet, or an immovable rabbet, for the lack of any better term. Then they started using things called sliding FILLESTERs, and those have a fence, but they're movable. Moving FILLESTERs or movable FILLESTERs. The benefit to that was that they could control the size of their rabbet that they were doing that way. And the 289 is considered in the book a FILLESTER and rabbet plane. Rabbet because the irons come all the way to the edge, so you can do a rabbet with them, and the FILLESTER or FILLESTER about the fence. I may have confused it even more by even giving a description, but so when you hear me go back and forth, the FILLESTER is the English term, and the FILLESTER is an American term coined maybe by Stanley. I don't know that, but that's why I keep switching between the two. So in the next part of this series on the iron planes, I'm going to do a plane that I really love a lot. It's a 289 rabbet, low angle blade, a perpendicular blade to the sole, FILLESTER because it has a fence, and chisel plane. And there's too much to get into on this plane in this at the end of this one, so I'm going to save that for the next part. I started to play with it and thinking I might be able to add it to this one, but I think that's too much. So I'm going to stop now, and I hope you guys let me know what you think about these videos. Participate in discussions about them if you want. But I'm just trying to get some of the information about these out here because I get a lot of questions from people about what planes they want to collect, what planes are needed for work. And so we'll go into some more of them, including the one that I just showed you, but also some of the other planes that are all iron that are for doing weather stripping and other jobs. So until then, take care of yourself and keep planing.